Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive. And today we're going to be tackling one of the most, I think you could say infamous corporate scandals ever,
Oh, yeah.
the
Terrible.
rise and fall of Enron.
Definitely.
So to guide us through all the twists and turns, we'll be using the smartest guys in the room, this incredible book by Bethany McLean and Peter Elkind.
Yeah, great book.
Yeah, it gives you this crazy behind-the-scenes look at Enron,
It does.
how it went from like this innovative company everyone was praising to crashing and burning in a spectacular fashion.
Yeah, it's a cautionary tale for sure
It really is.
about, what happens when ambition goes too far and profit becomes more important than, doing things the right way.
Ethics. Yeah,
Right.
totally.
Exactly.
So let's start at the beginning. Enron, they started out as this small, natural gas pipeline company.
Right.
But then under this guy, Kenneth, they kind of transformed into this massive energy trading giant.
Yeah, a global powerhouse.
It sounds like a success story,
I
right?
think so.
But the book reveals that a lot of it was built on hype.
Yeah. More smoke and mirrors than actual achievements.
Like those companies that overpromise and underdeliver. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's like they were selling a dream that wasn't quite rooted in reality.
Totally. And then you have Jeff Skilling coming onto the scene.
Oh, yeah, scaling.
He was all about high-risk strategies, right?
Big time, pushing Enron even further into energy trading and this thing called mark-to-market accounting.
Mark-to-market accounting. Okay, hold on. I think you need to break this down for our listeners because
Yeah, you can be a little confusing.
it sounds a little complicated.
Imagine you're running a lemonade stand, right?
Okay.
And you sign a contract to deliver like 100 glasses next week.
All right, I'm with you.
Now, let's say you think you can sell each glass for $1.
Okay.
With mark-to-market accounting, you could actually record that potential profit, that $100, right now, even though you haven't actually sold any lemonade yet.
Whoa. So it's like counting your chickens before they hatch, but on a massive scale?
Exactly. It's like saying you already have the money, even though you haven't actually earned it yet.
I see. So it makes them look way more profitable than they actually are in the moment.
Precisely. And while it can make things look really good on paper, it's incredibly risky because if those future profits don't actually materialize,
Then you're in trouble.
big trouble. It's like inflating a balloon more and more. It looks impressive until it pops.
And that's kind of what happened with Enron, right?
Yeah, their stock price soared, initially attracting investors, but it created this distorted picture of their financial health and set the stage for all sorts of deception.
And the book talks a lot about the work environment Skilling created, right?
Oh yeah, it was intense.
Not exactly a chill place to work.
It was all about taking huge risks, and anyone who questioned the company line, well, they were basically silenced.
Wow, so it was profits above everything else. Ethics didn't really seem to matter much.
It was like the Wild West of corporate culture.
There must be some crazy stories in the book that show just how bad it was.
Oh, there are plenty. One that stands out is when an executive raised concerns about a particular deal, and Skilling's response was, I don't want to hear any more of this negative crap.
Wow, that's intense. So much for speaking up.
Yeah, it really shows how dissent was stifled within the company.
And of course, then you have Andrew Fastow, Enron's CFO.
Ah, Fastow, the mastermind behind the financial smoke and mirrors.
He created this super complex web of off-balance sheet entities, right?
Oh, yeah, he was a master at that.
For those of us who aren't financial wizards, can you explain what those are and how they work to hide Enron's problems?
Sure, imagine you have a really messy room, right? Clothes and stuff everywhere, but you shove everything under the bed to make it look clean for a visitor.
Okay, I've been there.
Those under-the-bed spaces are like Enron's off-balance sheet entities. They're supposed to be separate companies, managing risk, but in reality, Enron controlled them completely.
Ah, so they could hide all their dirty laundry, so to speak.
Exactly. They stashed billions of dollars of debt in those entities, making their financial statements look way better than they actually were.
All a facade.
Pure illusion.
And Fasto wasn't just doing this out of the goodness of his heart, right?
Oh, no. He personally profited from these schemes to the tune of millions of dollars through partnerships like LJM and Chuco.
So while Enron was sinking deeper into debt, he was getting richer.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
The big question is, how did this go unnoticed for so long? There had to be some checks and balances in place.
You'd think so, but that's where the enablers come in. Arthur Andersen, Enron's auditor. They were making a ton of money from Enron and seemed to turn a blind eye to what was happening.
Like a referee getting paid to ignore the fouls.
Exactly, a classic conflict of interest.
And it wasn't just Arthur Andersen, right? Investment banks, Wall Street analysts, they were all part of it.
Oh yeah, they were all too happy to underwrite Enron's deals and issue buy recommendations for the stock, which just kept inflating this bubble.
So everyone was profiting, and no one wanted to rock the boat.
It was a collective delusion fueled by greed and this belief that Enron was too big to fail.
But as we know, that's never really the case.
Nope. The truth always comes out eventually.
And for Enron, things started to unravel in 2001, right?
That's right. And it's kind of ironic that Bethany McLean, one of the authors of the book we're discussing, played a key role in that.
Really? Okay, tell me more about that.
So McLean was a journalist for Fortune magazine, and she started to question Enron's crazy high valuations and their accounting practices.
She had a feeling something wasn't right.
Yeah, she was skeptical, and that led her to write an article called "Is Enron Overpriced?"
Wow, that's pretty gutsy going up against a giant like Enron.
It was a bold move,
Yeah.
but that article, along with concerns from other analysts and investors, started to poke holes in Enron's carefully crafted image.
So the pressure was building.
Exactly. And then in October 2001, Enron revealed a massive loss of $618 million.
Oof, that's a lot of money.
It was the beginning of the end. The house of cards started to collapse.
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive into the Enron scandal.
See you then. Welcome back.
It's kind of crazy to think about the people at the center of this whole Enron thing, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
these were real people making decisions that impacted so many others.
Absolutely. Their choices had huge consequences.
So let's start with Kenneth Lay, Enron's CEO. What was he like as a leader?
Lay was a complex guy. He had this charisma about him and a big vision that drew people in.
Like, he could really sell an idea.
Yeah. He seemed to believe in Enron's potential to change the world of energy.
But he was also kind of detached from the day-to-day stuff, right? More focused on the big picture.
Yeah, more of a hands-off approach, I guess you could say.
Which might have created an opening for someone like Jeff Skilling to come in and...
Exert his influence.
Yeah. Skilling was completely different from Lay in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah? How so?
Well, Skilling was this analytical mind, very detail-oriented. He loved risk pushing the boundaries.
And Enron was his chance to kind of build a company in his image.
Exactly, a company built on financial maneuvering. And that ambition really shaped Enron's culture, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It became this super intense environment.
Like the book talks about how competitive it was.
It was cutthroat, all about profits no matter what. Employees were expected to take big risks, and failure wasn't really an option.
So you can imagine the pressure that created.
It was a pressure cooker. And in that kind of environment, ethical lines could easily get blurred.
And then you have Andrew Fastow coming into the picture.
Fastow, the numbers guy.
He was the one who figured out how to make the books say whatever they needed to say.
Oh, yeah. He was a master at manipulating financial data, creating this maze of off-balance sheet entities.
All smoke and mirrors, basically.
Exactly.
And it sounds like Fastow got a thrill out of all of this.
The book describes a scene where he's almost giddy talking about these complex financial structures he'd created, like he was playing a game and winning.
Wow, so detached from the real-world consequences.
It seemed that way.
But how did they manage to fool everyone for so long? Weren't there any safeguards?
That's the question everyone was asking after Enron collapsed.
Mm.
It really highlights the role of the enablers.
Right, like Arthur Andersen, Enron's auditor, we talked about them before.
Yeah, but there were others too, the Wall Street investment bank's analysts.
They must have suspected something, right?
Maybe some of them did. But Enron was like a shiny object. Everyone wanted a piece of it.
So they looked the other way.
Investment banks were making huge fees. Analysts were rewarded for positive ratings. It was all about keeping that stock price up.
And no one wanted to be the one to burst the bubble.
Exactly. It was a collective delusion, this belief that Enron was invincible.
But as we've seen time and time again, no company is too big to fail.
The truth always comes out eventually.
And when it did for Enron, the consequences were devastating.
Not just for the executives, but for thousands of employees, investors who lost everything.
It really shows how unchecked greed can have these ripple effects, you know.
It destroys trust livelihoods, shakes the foundation of the whole system.
And it makes you wonder, did anything really change after Enron? We still see these scandals happening.
That's a good point. It's why stories like Enron's are so important to revisit.
They remind us what can happen when we ignore corporate wrongdoing, let greed run wild.
And it's not just about the big players, the CEOs and CFOs.
Right, it's about the everyday people who get caught in the middle.
The employees who lose their jobs, their savings, the investors left with nothing.
Enron is a reminder that corporate decisions have real human consequences.
And we all have a responsibility to hold companies accountable.
So zooming out a bit, what were the lasting impacts of Enron? Did it change how we think about corporate responsibility?
Well, on a practical level, it led to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002, which was meant to improve corporate governance and financial reporting.
Okay, so some actual regulations came out of it?
But I think Enron also had a deeper cultural impact.
In what way?
It shattered this myth of the infallible CEO, the smartest guys in the room.
Right, because clearly they weren't that smart.
It showed that even the most successful business leaders are susceptible to greed and ambition.
And it made us question how we define corporate success.
Exactly. Profits alone aren't enough.
It's about values, ethics, doing the right thing.
And it sparked a conversation about whistleblowers, too. Those who speak truth to power.
Like Sharon Watkins, who risked her career to warn Kenneth about Enron's accounting.
Exactly. Her courage showed how important it is for companies to protect those who speak up.
So what does all this mean for our listener? The person who might be thinking, well, I'm not running a giant company like Enron.
It's a good question, but the lessons from Enron apply to all of us, no matter our job.
Okay, I like that.
It's about recognizing that ethical blind spots can exist anywhere.
Right.
It's about speaking up when we see something wrong, holding leaders accountable.
Because as we learned from Enron, unchecked greed and a lack of accountability can have these devastating consequences.
Absolutely, and that's a powerful takeaway from this deep dive.
We've covered a lot today, the personalities, the greed, the failures that made this whole mess possible.
But there's still more to explore.
Right. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll examine the fallout from Enron's collapse, the legal battles, the impact on the energy industry, and the lasting lessons we can all learn from this cautionary tale. All right, so we're back for the final part of our Enron deep dive. We've talked about the personalities, the greed, the failures that led to the company's collapse.
Right. A lot of moving parts.
But it doesn't end there, does it? The story,
No, not at all. The aftermath of Enron's implosion was huge. It impacted so many people.
Yeah, the human cost of this whole thing is something we can't forget.
Absolutely.
You had thousands of employees who lost their jobs, their retirement savings,
Their lives were turned upside down.
all because of the decisions of a few people at the top.
A lot of those employees had put their life savings into Enron stock.
Oh, wow.
They believed in the company, and they were left with nothing.
That's heartbreaking.
It's a stark reminder that these corporate scandals, they're not just abstract events. They hurt real people.
And it wasn't just the employees, right?
No investors lost billions of dollars.
It really shook people's trust in the whole system.
It exposed cracks in the system, raised questions about the regulators like the SEC. Were they doing enough to prevent this kind of fraud?
And then there's Arthur Andersen, Enron's auditor.
Right, one of the biggest accounting firms in the world.
And they were caught up in it, too.
They paid a hefty price, convicted of obstruction of justice, and basically ceased to exist.
Wow, so a company that was once a symbol of stability can just vanish like that?
It shows that no institution is immune to the consequences of unethical behavior.
So what about the key players, the executives who orchestrated this whole thing?
They faced some serious repercussions.
Did they? What happened?
Kenneth, Jeff Skilling, Andrew Fastow, they were all hit with criminal charges.
And what was the outcome?
And Skilling were found guilty of multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. Unfortunately passed away before he could be sentenced.
Oh, wow.
But Skilling was sentenced to 24 years in prison, although his sentence was later reduced.
24 years? That's a long time.
It is. Fastow, on the other hand, decided to cooperate with the government.
Ah, so he turned state's evidence?
He did. He testified against and Skilling.
So he got a lighter sentence.
He did 6 years in prison.
So there was some justice served.
Yes, but the impact of Enron's collapse is still felt today, both by those directly affected and by the business world as a whole.
It's a cautionary tale for sure.
It serves as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed, the importance of ethical leadership.
And the need for strong oversight.
Absolutely, we can't let this happen again.
And we can't forget about the importance of speaking up when we see something wrong.
Whistleblowers are so crucial.
Like Sharon Watkins.
Exactly. Their courage can prevent further damage and help bring the truth to light.
So as we wrap up our Enron deep dive, what are the key takeaways?
I think the biggest lesson is that ethical behavior is not optional. It's fundamental to any organization.
It's the foundation of trust.
Exactly, and Enron shows what happens when that trust is broken.
Profits alone aren't enough.
No, it requires a commitment to ethical principles, transparency, and accountability.
And we all have a role to play in holding businesses accountable.
We can't be passive. We need to ask tough questions, demand better, and be vigilant.
The consequences of corporate greed can be devastating, as we've seen.
Absolutely.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive, and I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure.
And to our listener, I hope this exploration of the Enron scandal has been informative and maybe even a little bit eye-opening. It's a story that still resonates today, reminding us about the importance of ethics accountability and the need to challenge assumptions, even when it comes to those we perceive as the smartest guys in the room. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.